Hello and welcome to another session on women's writing. Let's continue. Let's complete the essay Feminist Novelist by Elaine Showalter. We shall also discuss the question answers, so it will be easier for you to study. So we stopped in page 37, and we are to start with George Egerton and her writings. Now, Egerton and her stories, George Egerton and her stories were not exactly feminist, but she was aware. It's not that she was not aware of the suppressed situations. She was aware of a suppressed sex antagonism in human relationships. Now, these torments were projected in their novels, showing female characters with destructive behaviors, because that was a way of escaping reality. She did not want to confront reality. So that was the problem with this age. These feminist novelists, starting from Olive Schreiner to Sarah Grant, they did influence a lot. They did write. They knew what they were writing. However, they did not know how to solve the problem. And their writings also were mostly, almost all their writings, though they tried to bring out the oppression of women, it did not do much help. So this was the phase, this feminist phase that Elaine Showalter speaks about. Of course, this phase did have its importance. It did have its influence in shaping the feminist perspectives or feminist writings and feminism, but it was not very, or it did not prove to be very productive one. So George Egerton, that's her pen name, she wrote, or she, for instance, if you look at her writing, if you look at her story, Keynotes, a novel, here she puts most violent expressions of antagonism in mouths of minor characters, not on the protagonist. It's in the mouths of minor characters. These violent expressions, these rebellions. Another instance is in the Spell of White Elf. In that story, the heroine's housekeeper wishes to have a child without a husband, without sinning or without disgrace, or that means without the help of man. So she wants a child, but without a husband, without falling into disgrace, without the help of man. Okay, so that is spoken by the heroine's housekeeper, not the heroine. The heroine, however, does not share this feeling, but comments vaguely. All right, she says, quote, "Do you know, I think that is not an uncommon feeling amongst a certain number of women. It seems congenial with some women to have deeply rooted in their innermost nature a smouldering enmity, aye, sometimes a physical disgust to men. It is a kind of kin feeling to the race dislike of white men to black." So where Egerton is very careful not to confront reality too much and makes her heroine neither agree nor disagree to the housekeeper's comment, and says it in a quite, it is quite natural. She comments as a quite natural feeling to have some people have that kind of enmity towards men, just like the white men has, or similar to that racial prejudices and racial, the enmity that white men has towards black men, at racist approach. So the hatred of, that is the hatred of women to men. So she says that some women have that. Another thing is, in discourse, these feelings are more central to the stories. Here, George Egerton explores suppressed anger, disgust, and also rage in situations where women are emotionally and economically dependent on their husbands or men. In each story, the woman projects her grievance into a more manageable opponent. These stories, therefore, can be taken as the study of psychology of oppression. The titles are very short and sardonic. Like, for instance, look at this story, Gone Under. Gone Under is a harrowing story of a woman whose lover arranges to have the illegitimate child. They have an illegitimate child, a child born out of wedlock. And the child is murdered. It's going to be murdered by the lover has arranged to murder the child with the help of the midwife. And here the story brings out the heroine's internal despair and her hatred, which eventually leads to her suicide. So she is not able to repel back. She is not able to do anything to save the child. The title Gone Under suggests not only death and surrender, but also the process of repression. Wedlock is another sensational title of a woman who murders her 3 stepchildren because of her jealous husband, because her jealous husband has separated her from her own child. Again, the woman protagonist in the story, she attacks, or her attacks are not on men, or their attacks are not directly. It is done indirectly. They don't attack men directly. In all these stories, they don't attack the person who's responsible, the men, directly. Rather, they take revenge indirectly by inflicting pain or even death on the weaker ones. Okay. Even in less violent stories, the heroine make other women object of hatred and refuse to confront men. Virgin Soil, Wendell Harris rightly describes, is all about absence of sex education for women. Now, the daughter in this story, the daughter comes up to accuse her mother for destroying her life. So that's what I said, even in less violent stories, the heroine make other women object of hatred and they refuse to confront the one who is responsible. They find fault with the weaker ones. So the daughter is married to a man, a philanderer and a pervert. Okay, and she has come home accusing her mother for having destroyed her life. Her mother, who knew what life is, who have understood what life is and how the attitude of men, she did not teach her proper sex education, meaning in the sense what are the things that is wanted or is needed in marriage, in the sense to keep a marriage going. Had she known this earlier, she would not have wanted to get married. So there is an episode, okay, where the protagonist regards or comments on a lovely oasis, And this lovely oasis is actually a reference to the desert of matrimony. Now what happens here in this story is this chosen husband, he's a philanderer and he's a pervert, and the daughter is safe from physical abuse both in terms of sex and otherwise only when this man, her husband, is after the cook of the house or when he is pursuing her. That means he needs her, or he considers his wife as an object of pleasure who would be there for him when he needs her at night. So she loathes him, she shivers at his touch, his breath and his hands. Her whole body revolts to his touch. Yet instead of confronting the man who's responsible for this, it is the mother whom she finds fault with. What has her mother done? Right? Why couldn't she have encountered with her husband? Why couldn't she have had a talk with her husband? Why couldn't she confronted the man? It seems we are to believe that the mother who have had an understanding of life should not have let her marry a man with whom she was not compatible. The real complaint, however, is not the girl's ignorance of life or sex education, but the problem here is the man's boorishness, his transformation of marriage into a legal prostitution, nightly degradation. But this problem is not confronted. The real problem is not confronted. Thus, this story makes it clear that the struggle is not between mothers and daughters, but between husbands and wives. Ultimately, Egerton's approach, where she avoids, or if you look at how she deals with this sort of problem, you will understand that she avoids problems or she avoids all this sort of approach. She avoids confronting the problems, she avoids solving the problems. And this depresses the readers, the woman readers. Although Egerton was aware of her preferences as a writer because she's a woman writer, and she knew what her responsibilities were, she did not, however, perceive them as problems. Whether it was because of her arrogance or self-protectiveness, we do not know. Or perhaps she wanted to reject all criticism. Olive Schreiner, on the other hand, knew this problem. However, she did not grow into a renowned writer. Only her African farm was worth reading. All the other books written by her was just tapping on the surface and not worth it. Thus, if we look at it from an angle, all these stories have a story to tell. The female oppression and their enemies were men, but they extended, or they never felt, or they knew the problem, and they wrote about the problem, but it was all to do with too much of narration, I guess, which did not solve the problem. There was a lot of narration, but the problems were not confronted. That was the problem of this feminist phase of writing. They set out with a mission but ended like Sarah Grant. Sarah Grant felt that withdrawing from reality or the world, they would find higher female truth. They were given the freedom to explore their experiences, but these writers, these feminist writers, they rejected it, or at least denied it. Their private rooms, a symbol of their profession, also sanctuaries linked closely to their own defensive womanhood. So with that, we come to the end of Feminist Novelist by Elaine Showalter. Now let's discuss some of the question answers. You are supposed to go through this glossary as well, because you might get questions from that also. So you are requested to go through it. It's there in your textbook. Now let's just go through the question answers. Answer the following in 2 or 3 sentences. What is feminist invalidism? Now, feminist invalidism, where does it come? Whereas the invalidism of feminine novelists was often a strategic evasion of the feminine role or power tactic, as George Eliot recognized when she had Rosamund Vincy threaten her father. You would not like me to go into consumption as Arabella Hawley did. Now, feminist invalidism seemed to have been an evasion of work. Even freed from the pressures of the three-decker, many women writers of this period found it difficult to finish their books or to write more about it. Now, what does it mean? Now, we can't write this answer there. So, what will you write for feminist, or what is feminist invalidism? Now, here's what you would write. What is feminist invalidism? First of all, we have to understand what is invalidism. What does invalidism mean? Invalidism refers to a kind of mental problem, or a problem where you have, it's a kind of mental disease. Okay, so the feminist invalidism, this ideology is from the Victorian period. The ideology of Victorian period had a great influence upon the discourses on mental diseases. Okay, and as Showalter points out here, there were prevailing Victorian psychiatric superstitions about the transmission of insanity in female life. So it's all about female insanity. That is why people believed that it's all based on psychiatric superstition, all right. That's what Elaine Showalter is trying to prove. Of course, it is not just from the literature of their own, but also from various other books that Elaine Showalter had written. Okay, and that is why people believed that since the reproductive system was the main source of mental illness in women, women were the prime carriers of madness. So the reproductive system, in the sense it could mean hormone changes and so on. Okay, and not only that, they felt that it was women who transmitted this. They were the prime carriers of madness, and they were likely to transmit it to their daughters. The daughters were likely to inherit maternal madness than the sons. You have that in literature of their own. In this work of Elaine Showalter itself. And invalidism is a state of being abnormally preoccupied with one's health. During the Victorian era, there arose a fashion for invalidism. That is also there. So it was feminist invalidism seems to have been an evasion of work. That is the most important part there. So during the Victorian period, there arose a fashion for invalidism. This cult challenged the male desire for fertile hourglass figures, since the invalid woman was thin and frail and rendered so ill as to jeopardize her reproductive potential. So invalidism was a continuum stretching from women who had occasional fainting and fits in extreme situations, and to those who limited their own movement or refused food. So it was a kind of fashion. There arose a fashion for invalidism. It can also be taken as a rebellious attitude. Now, the best example is Sarah Grant's Heavenly Twins, which we discussed, where the Colonel sums up that during Evadne's illness, he gets very irritated. And he says, what a damned nuisance these women are. There's always something the matter with them. Right? So invalidism was based, and also invalidism was based upon social status as well as gender. So this, if you write, you will be able to score well. Okay, feminist invalidism. Now what's the next question? So it's actually a little indirect, because you'll have to understand that phase, and also you have to understand this Victorian period and how this was a kind of fashion, and also the Victorian superstition, psychiatric superstition, which again subjugated women. Now, after feminist invalidism, what is Sarah Grant trying to show you through the story of the twins, and what is Contagious Disease Act are two very easy questions. Sarah Grant's Heavenly Twins, you can just go through Heavenly Twins, you'll find out, you'll be able to write down the answer. And the Contagious Disease Act, all you have to do is go through the glossary, and you have it there. The Contagious Disease Act instituted during the Crimean War, attempted to control syphilis by enforced examination, and so on. Okay, so the short notes are over. Now come to the paragraph question. You have to answer it not exceeding 100 words. So you have, what according to Jacobson is a real problem of the colonial writer. Now for that, come to page 32, turn to page 32, and the first paragraph, the second line. Okay, the first paragraph, second line. The real problem of the colonial writer, Jacobson suggests, up to parent literature, color of the parent literature. So up to that you have to mention up to that, and also you will have to, because it's 100 words, you will have to write about Olive Schreiner being a South African writer. Okay, so you can go for that paragraph. You'll have to go through that paragraph and write based on it. All right. And then what happens to Lindahl? The second question, page 29. That is from the African Farm. Page 29, you will have the last, that is the third paragraph in page 29. Lindahl's brief rebellion does not succeed, and so on up to teaching the lesson. So before you begin as Lindahl's brief rebellion, you'll have to give a short note about, or short note on African Farm, who Lindahl is, Olive Schreiner's Lindahl, who's a serious feminist heroine in the English novel, and also about her monologues and the sex role conditioning, narcissism and frustration and all that. So you'll have to explain all that and then write Lindahl's brief rebellion does not succeed, okay, as a continuation. Okay, so page 29. You can't just pick the same thing and write it, because you will have to understand. Here the gist is about, or the main thing is about, or is to understand the question. The questions are actually testing whether you understood feminist novelists. So you have to write them accordingly. Now next one is, why was the campaign launched for the abolition of the Contagious Disease Act? Now come to page number 21. Page 21, and there you have it. That is, women began to believe that, page not 21, sorry, 20. from page 20 onwards, the last paragraph, women began to believe that they had a moral right to assume leadership. From that up to page 21, that the first paragraph, the whole paragraph of page, the first paragraph of page 21, that is consolidated the view of male alliance dedicated to the persecution of women up to that. Okay. You can write them in your own words also. Please don't pick up every word from the text. Understand and then write it. Listen to the video also and then write it down. Then what was Screener's important contribution to the feminist tradition? Page 27, last paragraph, plus 28, first paragraph. 27. Page 27, the last paragraph. Screener, just cut off yet and write Screener made an important contribution. Page 27, last paragraph. Screener made an important contribution to the female tradition. Up to page 28, the first paragraph, the end, up to the end. Beckett's monologue without a beginning or an end, up to that. Now, the last two, they are easy to write. In Screener's story of an African farm, what happens to men and women? What you have to do, it's an assignment. You have to write the Google search, if possible, read the book, if possible. Okay, read the book and then go through the Wikipedia, or you can go through Wikipedia, or you can go through any of the summary. Write down the summary of African farm and give the answer. Conclusion, or you should bear in mind the question, what happens to men and women in Screener's African farm, and also you have to bear this feminist novelist, this what we studied also in mind, this phase itself and what Screener was trying to project. All that you should bear in mind, because your answer should not be cut and paste. It should be something where it should be like a literature student's writing. Okay, it shouldn't be just a cut and paste of Google search. Now next one is also the same thing. Trace how Showalter shows the growth and development of new woman that I have already explained in the first few videos. You can write an assignment based on that and also do a small research on new woman. So that's about it. We have completed this chapter and soon we shall move into the poetry section, and we'll start with Aunt Jennifer's she rose to Emily Dickinson's She Rose to His Requirements, and then Aunt Jennifer's Tiger, and then we'll move on to the prose and the play. So thank you and keep safe.